This is William Vazquez-Baez, a former Puerto Rico police officer. The United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York announced that William Vazquez-Baez, a former member of the Puerto Rico Police Department, was sentenced to 30 years in prison. Vazquez-Baez previously pleaded guilty to participating in a racketeering conspiracy and to planning the murder of a rival gang member, in connection with his agreement to assist a drug trafficking organization that shipped drugs to New York and distributed them from a Bronx daycare center. In the words of the U.S. Attorney Damian Williams, William Vazquez-Baez abused his position as a police officer to help a vicious drug organization distribute massive amounts of cocaine and massacre citizens he had sworn to protect. Today, Vazquez-Baez was rightly sentenced to 30 years in prison for his horrific crimes. Vazquez-Baez was an active police officer with the Puerto Rico Police Department from approximately 1994 until his arrest in connection with this case in May 2017. Members of La ONU gang in Puerto Rico participated in a drug trafficking operation that distributed cocaine in New York and protected their territory and trade with acts of violence. La ONU members paid Vazquez-Baez a salary to corruptly use his position as a police officer to further the interests of La ONU. Vazquez-Baez provided narcotics and intelligence, including information obtained from the police narcotics unit. When transporting large quantities of cocaine within the San Juan, Puerto Rico area, members of La ONU would contact Vazquez-Baez to ensure the shipment avoided areas of police activity. Vazquez-Baez paid bribes to other corrupt police officers who helped La ONU. Vazquez-Baez also assisted La ONU with acts of violence. In about 2006 or 2007, Vazquez-Baez alerted La ONU members that Freddy Mendez Rivera, a local resident, had complained to police about drug dealing occurring in his neighborhood, which led to La ONU members kidnapping and then killing Mendez Rivera. At around the same time, Vazquez-Baez informed a senior member of La ONU that the kidnapping was being reported over the police radio. Vazquez-Baez advised that, since the fact that Mendez Rivera had spoken with the police was known throughout the Carolina Narcotics Division, it was important that the body never be discovered. When later updated about what had happened, Vazquez-Baez laughed and remarked that Mendez Rivera would not be giving the police information any further. In exchange for a cash bonus, members of La ONU hired Vazquez-Baez to participate in the murder of Anthony Castro Carrillo in Carolina, Puerto Rico on May 9, 2007. Vazquez-Baez and members of La ONU stormed Castro Carrillo's residence while dressed as police officers and shot and killed him. In 2007, Vazquez-Baez delivered a confidential informant who was in his custody to members of La ONU who pretended to be other police officers. Those members of La ONU then shot and killed the informant. In addition to the prison term, Judge Furman sentenced Vazquez-Baez, 53, of Puerto Rico, to 3 years of supervised release, which he is currently serving, after which he will be put behind bars. This is Aaron Dean, a former Texas police officer who was convicted of manslaughter and fatally shooting Atatiana Jefferson through a rear window of her home in 2019, a rare conviction of an officer for killing someone who was also armed with a gun. Jurors also considered charging Aaron Dean with murder, but instead convicted him of manslaughter. The conviction comes more than 3 years after the white Fort Worth officer shot the black woman while responding to a call about an open front door. 38-year-old Dean will receive up to 20 years in prison, with the sentencing phase of his trial beginning in December 2022. He will face life in prison if convicted of murder. Dean, who had also been released on bond, was booked into the Tarrant County Jail following the verdict. For more than 13 hours over 2 days, jurors deliberated before determining him guilty of manslaughter. During the 6 days of testimony and arguments, the main issue was whether Dean knew the victim was armed when he shot him. Dean stated that he saw her weapon, but the prosecutors alleged that the evidence showed otherwise. Dean shot Jefferson on October 12, 2019, after a neighbor called the non-emergency police line to report that the front door to the Jeffersons' Fort Worth home was open. She had been playing video games with her nephew that night, and it emerged at trial that they had left the doors open to vent smoke from the hamburgers the boy had burned. The case was unusual for the relative speed at which the Fort Worth Police Department released a video of the shooting and arrested Dean, despite public outrage. He had finished a police academy the year before and quit the force without talking to investigators. According to body camera footage, Dean and another officer who responded to the call did not identify themselves as police at the house. Dean and Officer Carol Darch heard a noise in the backyard and quietly moved into the fenced-off area to see if they could find signs of forced entry. Dean, whose gun was drawn, fired a single shot through the window a split second after shouting to Jefferson, who was inside, to show her hands. Dean told the court that he was forced to shoot when he saw Jefferson pointing the barrel of a gun directly at him. But when questioned by the prosecutors, he admitted many mistakes and said that the actions he took before and after the shooting were more bad police work. When Dean shot, Dark's back was facing the window, but she testified that he never mentioned seeing a gun before pulling the trigger and didn't say anything about the weapon as they rushed in to search the house. Dean admitted on the witness stand that he only spoke about the gun after seeing it on the floor inside the house and that he never gave the victim first aid. The victim's 8-year-old nephew was in the room when his aunt was shot. He testified that he saw his aunt take out her gun, believing there was an intruder in the backyard. Dean will be put behind bars for manslaughter in the following months. This is Derek Michael Chauvin. He is a former American police officer who was convicted of killing George Floyd, a 46-year-old African-American man in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Chauvin served as a police officer from 2001 to 2020. Chauvin knelt on Floyd's neck for 9 minutes while Floyd was handcuffed and lying face down on the street, calling out, "I can't breathe," during an arrest made with other 3 officers on May 25, 2020. Chauvin was fired from the Minneapolis Police Department on May 26 and arrested on May 29. After the murder, there were several protests in the Twin Cities and throughout the rest of the United States, which later spread around the world. Chauvin had 18 complaints against him on the official record and was involved in 3 police shootings. One of them was fatal. On October 29, 2006, he shot and killed an Ojibwe, Wayne Reyes, with 23 gunshots. Chauvin almost killed Ira Latrell Tolles, who was unarmed, in the early morning of May 24, 2008, by beating and shooting him twice. Chauvin was put on 3-day leave on August 8, 2011, for his involvement in the shooting of Leroy Martinez, who was not armed. Chauvin hit a 14-year-old black boy in the head with a flashlight, then held him down with his knee for almost 17 minutes, ignoring the boy's complaints that he couldn't breathe. The Minnesota 4th Judicial District Court put Chauvin on trial for unintentional second-degree murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter of Floyd on March 8, 2021. On April 20, he was convicted of the charges. On June 25, he was sentenced to 22.5 years in prison, minus the 199 days of service. He may be supervised release if he has good behavior after 2/3 of his sentence before any deductions of time. For this second-degree sentence, he may be sentenced to 15 years. In December 2021, Chauvin pleaded guilty to federal charges of violating Floyd's civil rights by using unreasonable force and ignoring Floyd's medical needs. At the same time, Chauvin pleaded guilty to violating a 14-year-old boy's civil rights in 2017 by using unreasonable force. On July 7, 2022, Chauvin was sentenced to 21 years in prison for breaking Floyd's civil rights. The federal and state sentences are to be executed concurrently. Chauvin's anticipated release date on the state sentence is December 10, 2035, according to the Minnesota Department of Corrections.